I was staring at my phone when the message came in. My mom texted, "Please don't come. The family wants a Vrama, free wedding." A second later, my sister Serena liked it. I replied, "Great choice. Then you'll be free of my payments too." The family chat went silent, then flooded with questions, but I was already gone. I closed the app. Feeling the cold, final snap of a cord that had been stretched too thin for too long. It wasn't loud, that snap, but it was the sound of my life finally breaking free. I wish I could tell you that message shocked me into silence. But the truth is, it only confirmed a ledger I had been keeping in my heart for years. My name is Payton. And in my family, I was never the princess. I was the reliable one, the spreadsheet queen, the financial failsafe. That was my assigned role long before I was old enough to understand I could choose a different one. From the outside, we looked picture perfect. The enviable American family. My mother, Marissa, carried herself like she was born to host perfect, polished gatherings. Her smile sharp enough to cut through any room. My father drifted through life, quietly stepping aside whenever conflict approached. And then there was my sister, Serena, beautiful, adored, and endlessly excused. When she walked into a room, people made space. When I walked in, people handed me responsibilities. I sat in my downtown apartment. The city noise a dull hum 7 floors below me. The light from the window hit the screen of my laptop, where a complex grid of color, coded payments glowed back at me. Venue deposits, catering schedules, floral installments. Every single line item, every bill, every pending invoice was tagged with my name. I was paying for a wedding I was now barred from attending. The dismissal wasn't new, just formalized. I remembered the 100 little cuts that preceded this final blow. Like the time I suggested we adjust the guest count to match the actual budget I had outlined. Serena didn't even look up from her phone. Her voice, laced with that familiar entitlement, floated over the table. "Pate, can't you just make it work? You always do." That sentence had sat in my chest for days, a small, painful stone. I'm a project manager by trade. Structure makes sense to me. People, not always. I like deadlines, organized priorities, and the predictable logic of cause and effect. So, when my mother, Marissa, needed help planning Serena's wedding, I said yes, the way I always did. It was an involuntary reaction, a reflex born of years of obligation, not affection. It wasn't even a question. I didn't do it because Serena deserved it, frankly. She never thanked me once. I did it because my mother expected it, and for too long, my compliance was the only currency I had with them. I ran my thumb across the glass of my phone, reviewing the original text. Drama? Free? The irony was a bitter taste. Their idea of a drama, free life was one where I remained silent, compliant, and constantly funding their expensive illusion. I thought about the one person who truly saw me. My grandmother, Evelyn. She had this way of listening that made time slow down. In her small, quiet garden, she'd trim her roses while telling me that strength isn't only in what you carry, but also in what you refuse to pick up. I hadn't understood it then. I thought being strong meant saying yes to everything they asked. But today, the message was clear. I wasn't just uninvited, I was dismissed, disposable, and ultimately interchangeable. The quiet snap I felt inside, that was me stepping out of the role they assigned me. It was the first time I realized I was not part of their celebration. I was only funding it. And for the first time in 3 decades, that truth didn't hurt. It steadied me. It made me absolutely, chillingly clear on what I had to do next. They wanted a drama, free wedding. They could have won. But the financial rug I was under was about to be pulled out entirely. I closed the project management spreadsheet. The next file I opened was the vendor contracts. I was done being their safety net. They had no idea what was coming next. The quiet snap inside me had already taken place. Now came the inventory of the damage. I closed the laptop, unable to look at the wedding budget again, without wanting to physically tear the screen from the hinges. That spreadsheet wasn't a plan, it was a memorial to every boundary I had failed to set for the past decade. I was 32. A successful project manager for a major construction firm, yet I was sitting in my own apartment. Feeling like a subordinate who had just been fired from a project I was solely funding. This feeling, this strange mixture of capability and profound uselessness, was the central theme of my life with the Millers. We were the family of surface perfection. My father, Richard, was a successful, if distant, engineer. My mother, Marissa, lived for the quarterly social calendar, for the perfect placement of the wine glasses, for the illusion of domestic bliss. She taught us early on that appearances were everything, and my sister, Serena, learned the lesson perfectly. Serena, with her bright, unrestrained confidence, had mastered the art of being seen. She was the vibrant, impulsive painting constantly admired. I was the sturdy, necessary frame, ensuring nothing fell apart. I remembered planning my own 25th birthday. I had asked for something simple, maybe a quiet dinner. Marissa had sighed and said, "Payton, honestly, why do you make everything so difficult? Just handle the reservations for the family dinner. It's easier that way." My birthday wasn't about me. It was another logistics task. Serena, that same year, had a destination bachelorette weekend, all expenses mysteriously covered, and every detail praised. I realized then, staring at the muted family chat on my phone, that I had internal conflict that went beyond mere resentment. My internal conflict was the inability to distinguish between being genuinely helpful and being ruthlessly used. I had equated my self-worth with my utility to them. If I solved the problem, if I paid the bill, if I organized the chaos, then I was needed. And if I was needed, I must, surely, be loved. The wedding, which was now scheduled to be drama-free, thanks to my absence, had been my biggest project yet. When Marissa first asked, she didn't even use the word help. She used the word manage. "Payton, you manage the finances. Serena simply doesn't have the head for it. And you're so good with spreadsheets." It was a backhanded compliment, a praise of my utility that simultaneously dismissed my sister's laziness and my own desire for actual connection. I had handled the deposit on the historic venue, a sum totaling over $40,000. I coordinated the lighting team, the catering schedules for 300 guests, and the floral installments. Every single bill had landed on my desk, and I paid them without hesitation, using my savings, my bonus checks, my reserves. I justified it by thinking, I'm securing their happiness. I'm buying peace. I was a project manager buying a smooth timeline for a family that didn't know how to run their own lives. But the subtle disrespect kept compounding. I recalled a meeting just 3 months ago. I was showing them the budget projections, trying to explain that Serena's last-minute choice for custom invitations meant we had to cut back somewhere else. Serena sat across the mahogany table, texting her fiancé, Ethan, scrolling endlessly, barely glancing at my carefully color-coded projections. I pointed out a discrepancy, a necessary adjustment. And that's when she'd sighed, not even looking up, and delivered the line that stuck like glue to my ribs. "Pate, can't you just make it work? You always do." The sentence contained no gratitude, no respect, only the wary expectation of my endless capability. It was not a request. It was a command built on the foundation of my past obedience. The silence from my father, who was in the room and said nothing, was just as loud. The uninvitation text was cruel, yes, but Serena liking it was the ultimate dismissal of my humanity. It was the confirmation that my value was less than zero once my checkbook was closed. Now, as I breathed in the stale apartment air, the resentment I had long buried under layers of logistics finally began to surface, sharp and cold. It was time to stop managing their project and start managing my own life. It was time to find out what happened, when the reliable one finally broke the timeline. I could ignore the dismissal of my time, the lack of gratitude for my money, but the next request crossed a boundary that wasn't just mine. In the days immediately following the uninvitation text, my family chat took on a bizarre, cheerful quality. The forced positivity was suffocating. A curated performance of unity, meant to highlight my absence. I was still added to the chat, a strange, silent witness to their continued planning, which was the first sign they still considered me a resource, even if an exiled one. The second sign came disguised as excitement. My mother, Marissa, announced she wanted to extend the celebration into a full wedding week, a series of events designed, she stressed, to impress Ethan's highly formal family. She said it lightly, as if she were discussing whether to serve chicken or fish, but her eyes, when she talked to Serena, were darting toward the old, locked wooden desk in the corner of the living room. That desk belonged to my grandmother, Evelyn. And inside it, carefully secured, was Evelyn's emergency savings envelope. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, turning the celebratory mood in the room toxic. My grandmother had a small but significant fund tucked away, money she had saved from her fixed income over 2 decades, the only true financial safety net she had. She protected that money like sacred ground. "Mum," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice even, despite the internal alarm screaming. "That's not what that money is for. That's for her medical needs, or if the roof finally goes." Marissa blinked, a practiced look of confused offense clouding her face. "Payton, darling, don't be dramatic. Serena is only getting married once. This is an investment in their future reputation. Besides," she waved a dismissive hand, "we'd pay her back, of course. Just a loan. She doesn't even use it. A loan. From money that ensures her long-term independence." I looked desperately toward Serena, hoping for some flicker of awareness. Some sign that she understood the moral weight of what our mother was suggesting, or perhaps what they had already discussed. But Serena just shrugged, adjusting the sleeve of her new cashmere sweater, a gift I had quietly paid for last month. "It's not a big deal, Pate," she echoed her mother's sentiment with alarming ease. "Grandma doesn't even use that money. It just sits there." My stomach tightened further. They had planned this. Or at least, they had talked about it when I wasn't around, assuming I would smooth the logistics, assuming my loyalty to the family trumped my loyalty to Evelyn. They saw my grandmother's savings not as a sacred fund, but as a pool of available capital. I swallowed down the urge to scream. The anger wasn't just about the money. It was about the naked, casual entitlement, the willingness to put the one truly vulnerable family member at risk for the sake of a few more days of social posturing. This was an escalation I could not ignore. Later that week, I drove Evelyn to a dress fitting. She insisted on a new gown, saying she wanted to look her best for Serena's wedding, completely unaware of the text message I had received. As she stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric over her hips, she moved slowly but proudly. While the fitting assistant was momentarily distracted, Evelyn leaned in and whispered, her voice carrying that trembling softness that only truth does. "I heard your mother talking, dear. They're preparing things without you." It sounded complicated. I froze. My grandmother, the gentle observer, saw more than any of us. She sensed the undercurrents of deceit. I squeezed her hand, unsure whether to admit the full extent of the emotional and financial betrayal. Before I could form a response, the assistant called us back to the mirror, pulling us away from the heavy truth. The realization settled that night as I looked at the dark, familiar outline of Evelyn's name in my contacts. I could tolerate being discarded, but I could not tolerate her being compromised. My self-worth might have been tied to my utility, but my soul was tied to her protection. The conflict was no longer about me being the victim, it was about me becoming the defender. I knew then that the time for quietly enabling them was over. I was shifting my project management skills from building their event to dismantling their entire operation. The moment I knew their cruelty wasn't an accident, but a coordinated plan, came with a soundless crack. It was 2 days after the conversation with Evelyn in the dress shop. I walked into Marissa's house to drop off the finalized timeline for the rehearsal dinner, a document I had spent 5 hours correcting after Serena had casually moved the venue time. The house smelled faintly of expensive lilies and the nervous energy of impending social obligation. Serena was on the plush sectional, scrolling through her phone, her thumb hovering over the family group chat. "Oh," she said, glancing up when she noticed me. "Didn't know you were coming by." Her tone was worse than hostile. It was utterly dismissive, the way one acknowledges a delivery person or a minor inconvenience. Marissa glanced at me from the armchair, adjusting a pillow. "We are confirming the guest seating, Payton. Serena found a better layout than the one you sent. Better, not kinder, not more efficient. Just better because it originated with Serena, the star of the show." I placed the folder on the coffee table, folding my hands tightly. The layout I sent was calculated to meet the fire marshal's requirements and the current chair rentals, I stated, sticking to the facts. Serena didn't reply verbally. Instead, her screen lit up with the very message I dreaded. It was my mother's original uninvitation text from 4 days earlier. It scrolled into view, large and undeniable on her brightly lit screen. "Please don't come. The family wants a drama-free wedding. Right there, in front of me." In the living room I had helped furnish, and in the home I had helped finance, Serena's thumb tapped the little heart icon next to the message. A single, silent digital-like. It didn't make a sound, but something inside me did a soft, painful crack, like thin ice giving way under pressure. Serena didn't even look up from her phone as she locked the screen. Her focus was absolute, her disregard complete. "It's for the best, Pate," she said, her voice airy and final. "Everyone agrees. Everyone." I remembered staring at the two of them, the air suddenly too heavy to breathe. My grandmother's whispered warning echoed in my mind. "They're preparing things without you." This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a lapse in judgment brought on by wedding stress. This was intentional, coordinated, and carried out with the same casual cruelty someone uses when swatting away a pest. They were not just accepting my absence, they were celebrating it. They were congratulating themselves on successfully eliminating the one person who carried their burden. I stood there, feeling the full weight of my 2 years and every dollar I had ever spent on them. The truth finally arrived, naked and undeniable. They weren't relying on me. They were consuming me. And they viewed my erasure as a gift to their collective happiness. The heartbreak wasn't that they didn't want me. The heartbreak was realizing that they had truly planned this, that they were unified in their decision, and that my absence was so easily validated with a single tap of the thumb approval. I finally spoke, my voice a dull monotone. "The rehearsal dinner timeline is on the table. Adjust the chair count." Marissa frowned, sensing a coldness she couldn't immediately pinpoint. "Payton, don't be prickly. We'll just pay for the extra chairs." I met her gaze with a clarity I had never possessed before. "You will," I agreed. "Because I won't be paying for them." I turned and walked out. The old, desperate need for validation was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical calm. My feet carried me down the pristine marble steps, past the manicured lawn, and toward my car. They had defined the terms of the relationship transactional. Now, I would simply execute the final transaction. I knew my next move would be a final, irreversible strike. Driving home, my mind raced, not with emotion, but with logistics. I was a project manager, and the problem was simple. I was listed as the owner and payer on an event I was not invited to. I knew exactly where all the leverage was located. and they were about to find out that the frame that held their perfect painting was the one that determined its existence. I was going to use my organizational skills, not to fix their chaos, but to return it to them, multiplied by 10. The quiet anger was gone, replaced by the chilling resolve of a woman who had finally realized she was dealing not with family, but with a hostile takeover. That night, staring at the payments on my laptop, I stopped seeing a celebration and started seeing a ledger, documenting my own erasure. It was almost 9 in the evening. I was sitting at my kitchen island, the overhead light casting a bright, harsh glare on the screen. Line after line of expenditures glowed back at me. I totaled the deposits, over $80,000 already paid out, all tied to my personal account. All intended for the wedding I was barred from attending. For years, told myself my family didn't mean to take advantage of me, that I was helping them manage their beautiful, chaotic lives. But staring at those payments now, after seeing Serena like the message that dismissed me, I finally saw the truth. They were not relying on me. They were consuming me. My phone buzzed once. A new message in the family thread. Serena again, utterly oblivious to the existential crisis she had triggered. Mom wants my layout instead. The text read, "Send the new vendor details. No please, no thank you, no acknowledgement of the hours I'd spent building a functional plan." It was surreal how quickly entitlement could become mundane cruelty. I closed the laptop before I could second-guess what came next. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. It felt like something inside me had gone still and sharp, the emotional pain cauterized by 4 days of cold, hard clarity. I opened a private message to my mother, Marissa, finding the thread that contained the original uninvitation text. I looked at the 3 words I had sent earlier. Great choice. And then, I added the second sentence, the one they weren't expecting. I typed, "Then you will be free of my payments too." No explanation, no anger, just the quiet, devastating announcement of a major financial withdrawal. I hit send. The silence that followed felt almost holy, a brief, clean moment of freedom before the inevitable storm. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window. A woman who had finally stepped out of a role she never chose. I opened my laptop again, this time with professional purpose. The task was simple, though massive: systematically dismantle the entire wedding infrastructure. One by one, like pulling threads from a tightly woven tapestry, I reviewed every contract tied to the event. The historic venue agreement, the high-end catering, the specialty lighting team, the decor rentals. Every single deposit, every future payment, every official approval was tied to my name. The authority they had assumed was theirs had always been mine. I didn't need to argue with them. I just needed to stop enabling them. I drafted a professional email template. It was clean, concise, and utterly devoid of family drama. To the venue coordinator, referencing Agreement Section 4.2. Regarding withdrawal of financial sponsorship, we will not be moving forward. Please cancel the pending invoice for the next installment and return the deposit as per Clause 8A. To the caterer, reference Agreement 4.7. Termination of services. Do not process the final payment scheduled for next week. Confirm receipt of cancellation. I emailed each vendor individually. This wasn't revenge gossip. It was boundary setting, clean and professional. I didn't disclose family issues, I simply cited contract sections and payment withdrawal. As I worked, a strange peace filled the room. Not satisfaction, not vengeance, but alignment, like I was finally acting in a way that matched the hard truth I had faced. The task took hours, the list of contracts seeming endless. Around midnight, just as I was sending the final confirmation to the lighting team, I heard a soft, distinct knock on my door. I opened it to find my grandmother, Evelyn. Her small frame seemed even smaller in the hallway light. She lived 15 miles away and rarely drove at night. She stepped inside and sat on my couch, smoothing her skirt, the way she always did when she was gathering courage. "They called me," she said quietly. "They want to know why you've stopped helping." I didn't need to ask who. "I'm done helping, Grandma," I replied, my voice thick with exhaustion and relief. She nodded, her eyes wise and knowing. "I know they hurt you, dear. But you don't have to carry them anymore." Her voice trembled slightly, and that more than anything broke something open in me. My family had treated her the same way. An afterthought, a resource to be used. She knew what it meant to love people who didn't protect you. I took her hand. The skin fragile and warm. "I'm done carrying them, Grandma. I'm choosing us this time." She squeezed my hand back, her eyes shining, not with sadness, but with something like pride. Before she left, she whispered a promise that was both anchor and shield. "They'll be home in 2 days, darling. When they come home, we'll be ready." And for the first time in my life, standing in the cold light of my own logic, I knew the power of that quiet unity. I had secured my financial freedom, and now, with Evelyn by my side, I was ready to face the emotional fallout. The next morning, the city itself seemed to hold its breath for the moment they were scheduled to return. My apartment felt strangely quiet, like the calm eye of a storm I had willingly created. I brewed tea, the steam warming my face as the gravity of the situation settled deeper into my chest. This was the day everything shifted. I checked my phone one last time. No messages from my family, not even a courtesy update about their flight. Of course not. As far as they were concerned, I didn't exist unless they needed a solution. My grandmother, Evelyn, arrived before 7:30 in the morning. She sat at the kitchen table, folding and unfolding a linen napkin, her eyes drifting toward the window every few seconds. She had dressed with care, wearing a deep navy dress and the small silver pendant that she said represented clarity. "Are you sure you're ready, darling?" she asked softly. I nodded, feeling a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with arrogance, and everything to do with self-protection. "More than ready, Grandma. This isn't anger. This is logistics." She smiled faintly, a small but powerful gesture of approval. "We arrived at the airport earlier than necessary." Evelyn holding my arm as we walked through the terminal. Her presence was the anchor I'd needed my whole life, steady, warm, and honest. Every step felt like reclaiming ground I didn't know I'd lost. Our attorney, Mason Hill, met us near the arrivals hall. He was calm, collected. The kind of person who made chaos feel manageable. He was in his late 40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, holding a thin leather portfolio. He nodded to us. "Everything's in order," he said, flipping open a folder briefly. "We'll wait until they exit baggage claim. They'll likely approach you first. Assuming you're here to greet them. Be prepared for that initial exchange." "Prepared for their version of the story," I murmured. Mason offered a faint, dry smile. "People who depend on you rarely prepare to face a world where you've stopped giving." Evelyn squeezed my hand, a silent signal of strength. A ripple of movement pulled our attention to the sliding glass doors. Passengers began spilling out with tired steps and crinkled clothing. Then I saw them. Marissa led the way, back straight and expression sharp, as if she'd returned from a triumphant holiday, rather than a cancelled engagement planning trip. Serena followed closely, dragging an oversized suitcase that looked far heavier than she cared to carry. Ethan, Serena's fiancé, walked behind her, face buried in his phone, already projecting indifference. For a fleeting second, instinct tugged at me. The old urge to greet them, to smooth things over. To perform the role of the devoted, helpful daughter and sister to keep the peace. But that version of me belonged to a life I no longer lived. My mother spotted us first. Confusion flickered across her face, quickly replaced by irritation, the sudden appearance of an inconvenient variable. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. "What are you doing here, Payton?" She snapped, the familiarity of her demanding tone like a physical shock. "You didn't need to pick us up. We already have a ride. We're not here to pick you up," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the internal tension. Serena rolled her eyes, the very picture of exasperation. "Then what? You're here to apologize for ruining our wedding plans, I assume." Mason stepped forward before I could speak. His movement was fluid and professional, a barrier dropping between the family and me. "Good morning," Mason said evenly. "My name is Mason Hill. I represent Payton and her mother, Evelyn Brooks, in a matter requiring your immediate attention." The color drained from Marissa's face, starting from her sharp cheekbones and receding entirely. Serena blinked rapidly, her chest rising in shallow, surprised breaths. Ethan finally looked up from his phone, his face registering confusion, then immediate, calculated caution. "This must be a joke," Marissa said, forcing a harsh, brittle laugh. "A lawyer. For what?" "For the financial exploitation concerning wedding-related funds," Mason replied, his tone precise and emotionless, as he handed her a thick, sealed envelope. "And the attempt to use your mother's savings without consent." The color drained from my mother's face. Serena blinked rapidly. They knew, finally, that this wasn't just a family argument. This was a consequence they could not buy their way out of. Marissa snatched the thick envelope from Mason's hand, but didn't open it. She was trying desperately to regain control of her expression, the picture of polished perfection cracking at the edges. "We didn't exploit anyone," she insisted, her voice tight. "Everything was agreed upon. Payton offered to help. She always does. That's the problem," I said quietly, stepping slightly forward, though Mason's presence remained a solid, reassuring wall. "You expected it not because I wanted to, but because you refused to see me as anything other than a source of solutions." Serena took a sharp step toward me, jabbing a finger in my direction, her entitlement finally boiling over into raw hostility. "You abandoned your responsibilities! You ruined everything! All you had to do was stay out of the way. Stay out of the way." The phrase hung there, heavy and cruel. My grandmother, Evelyn, inhaled sharply. "You told her not to come," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but gaining unexpected strength. "You told my granddaughter she wasn't welcome at a wedding she paid for." Serena faltered, her aggressive glare weakening under Evelyn's quiet fury. Marissa spun toward my grandmother, instantly defaulting to dismissive condescension. "Mother, stop being dramatic. This is a family matter." "No," Evelyn said firmly, lifting her chin, drawing attention despite her age and small stature. "Family doesn't discard one person to elevate another. Not for a wedding. Not for anything." A crowd had begun forming behind us, travelers slowing their steps, murmuring as the tension thickened the air in the arrivals hall. My mother hated scenes. Her cheeks reddened instantly as she glanced around, as if public humiliation were somehow another one of my tactical maneuvers. "We didn't do anything wrong," Marissa insisted, her composure finally starting to shred. "You're twisting this." Mason opened another folder, his movements precise, displaying documents like evidence in a courtroom. "These are copies of the messages sent to Payton," he stated calmly, including the one uninviting her to the event, and the public like attached by Serena Miller. "And this," he held up a separate stack of paper, "is documentation of the $80,000 in payments she has already made and the subsequent cancellation notices she issued." I watched my mother's eyes flick from page to page, her jaw tightening. The documentation was irrefutable. She couldn't argue with my ledger. Then Mason handed Serena a separate envelope. "What's this supposed to be?" Serena asked, her voice cracking slightly. "Notice regarding the attempted redirection of your mother, Evelyn Brooks's emergency fund," Mason replied, his tone cool and clinical. "An account Payton has been monitoring, as she is the only family member who has never withdrawn from it." Serena clutched the envelope like it might burn her. Ethan, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up, a practiced charm still clinging to his voice. Look, can we all calm down? This is getting blown out of proportion. Blown out of proportion. Evelyn repeated, her voice steady now. You encouraged Serena to ask for more. More money. More support, things she never earned. You both tried to take my savings to pay for your reputation. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not. Just stop talking. Serena snapped at him. Something inside her seemed to deflate. Her shoulders sagged, her bravado leaking away in slow, painful beats. She looked less like the glittering bride she'd envisioned herself as, and more like a child caught doing something selfish. Marissa shoved the documents back at Mason, her hand shaking. We can fix this. Just tell us what you want, Payton. I took a breath, steady and sure, feeling the full, clean force of my freedom. I want you to understand that I'm done, I said. Done being your safety net. Done paying for consequences you never learn from. Done pretending we're a family when you treat me like a mistake. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then Serena whispered, her voice barely audible. So you're punishing us? I shook my head. No. I'm protecting myself. Mason stepped in again, his timing perfect. There are steps you'll need to follow. You'll have to respond to these notices within the given time frame. And until this matter is resolved, you're not permitted to access Evelyn's accounts. Marissa finally opened the envelope she was clutching. Her eyes scanned the first line, and her expression crumbled, fear replacing indignation. This could get us in trouble, she whispered, the polished facade finally dissolving. It already did, my grandmother replied, her voice ringing with the finality of truth. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. I had nothing left to prove. My father, Richard, who had been a silent observer throughout the entire confrontation, finally stepped forward. He looked utterly defeated, his usual non-committal expression replaced by a genuine shadow of regret. He stared at the floor. I'm sorry, Payton, he said softly, the words barely audible. We should have done better. All of us. We failed you. It was the closest thing to a real apology I had ever heard from him. I nodded, accepting the words as a statement of fact without letting them excuse 20 years of neglect. Mason gathered his folders. We're done here, he stated, his voice ringing with quiet authority. My grandmother took my arm again, her grip steady and warm. As we turned to leave, my mother called out, her voice stripped of its usual sharpness, now tinged with genuine fear. Payton, wait! What are we supposed to do now? I paused, turning back just enough to meet her eyes one last time. Her confidence had dissolved entirely. She looked small and unprepared, forced to face the reality she always paid me to manage away. Figure it out, I said. The same way you expected me to. And with that, I walked away, not out of anger, but out of freedom. It was the first real, unburdened freedom I had felt in years. The airport noise, which had been a harsh backdrop, now sounded like the steady pulse of a city I was finally choosing to live in on my own terms. In the weeks that followed, everything settled the way truth always does, quietly but permanently. The notices Mason filed moved forward, establishing ironclad, legal boundaries around Evelyn's savings. The little fund, the sacred ground, was now protected, and so was she. The account was monitored not by me, but by a legal trust, ensuring no more borrowing, no more pressure disguised as family tradition. I visited Evelyn more often after that. We would sit in her small garden while she trimmed roses, just like she had when I was a child. But this time, she didn't look tired. She looked lighter, as if she had been holding her breath for years without realizing it. You saved both of us, darling, she whispered one afternoon, resting a hand over mine. I didn't feel like a savior, though. I felt like someone finally stepping into her own life. The wedding plans dissolved almost overnight. Vendors sent confirmations of canceled payments, and I processed the few minor deposit returns that were still legally owed to me, treating it like closing out a failed business venture. Messages trickled into my phone. Some angry from Serena, some embarrassed from Ethan, some painfully silent from my father. I didn't respond to any of them. Not out of spite, but because there was truly nothing left to say. The conversation had concluded in the arrivals hall. I took the professional clarity I had gained and channeled it into a new purpose. I applied for a volunteer position at a local advocacy center that supported older adults, people like Evelyn, who deserved protection long before anyone noticed they needed it. For once, I wasn't fixing chaos. I was choosing purpose. My project management skills were put to use building a defense for others, not a prison for myself. Looking back, I used to think love meant carrying everything for the people who claimed they needed me. I thought strength meant being the rock they leaned on. But real love, the kind that heals instead of drains, never asks you to disappear so others can shine. My family's choices didn't define me. My boundaries did. Walking away wasn't the end of something broken. It was the beginning of something honest.